don't go see the new Indiana Jones movie unless you want to contemplate ending your life. And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, he spends the whole movie being a sad boy. There's like a scene in the movie where he literally wakes up and he has like that old man like like, oh my god, like kind of wake up thing, you know? And then he's in his boxers and he goes to one of his neighbors to like the youths and knocks on the door and tells them to turn their music
fellow
down.
Kids.
Yeah, dude, dude, I'm not even lying. I almost shut it off. I was almost done at that point. And that's like, well, actually, it's about 30 minutes into the movie because you have to go through this insanely extended scene that is supposed to be like, quote unquote, classic Indiana Jones. I mean, talk about a massive bait and switch. Like that first like 25, 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
It might be closer to 20, but that opening segment it is an absolute bait and switch. And to be honest, it's not even that good. Like if you stack that up against all of the openings, and I'll throw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in there as well. Like it's not as good as the other ones. He like all of these coincidences happen. Like he puts on the are we allowed to say Nazi? That was one of the things I was thinking about this stream. I mean, we're not monetizing this.
Can we say not see?
Nazis. Whatever, man. You know, he steals one of their uniforms and it's got a bullet hole in the back of it. And he's like, it'll be fine. No one will question that. And of course, it's like 10 minutes later, it's the thing that gets him like caught again or whatever. And dude, honestly, and because I want to talk about the franchise kind of as a whole in this discussion, because I don't know if I can spend the entire time talking specifically about this movie.
Dude, let's go through it frame by frame.
But that would take us like 12 hours. But it's unbelievably frustrating to go into a movie that fundamentally either made Indiana Jones the way that he was in Dial of Destiny or had no clue what they were doing. And it shocks me to think that they didn't know what they were doing. Like I'd be like, you really, you know, they're classics. I think Raiders came out 45 years ago. I mean, that movie it's a absolute classic.
It is.
You know, I know you're not the biggest fan of Temple of Doom, and I feel like that's a discussion for a different time. But that movie is significantly influential.
That movie's still decent, like especially in comparison to this bullcrap.
Dude, I know. It's got and we talked about that last week. Temple of Doom has, I think a lot of it comes down to sort of like logical inconsistencies.
Yes.
As far it's the worst in that as far as the series is concerned.
Yeah, it is. It's like I understand there's some suspension of disbelief.
Of course.
There's things going on, but then they take some strong liberties with that in Temple of Doom. Go ahead. Though.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember where I was going with this. But you go into this movie, right? And we're like on the idea of this bait and switch. And honestly, man, this might be one of the worst offenses that I've seen of, hey, don't you want this? Well, that's not what you're getting for the next 2 hours. Here's a story about an old man who pretty much wants to end his life for 2 hours. That is like a shadow of his former self, and he gets the most annoying. Well, she is definitely top 3 annoying side characters of all time.
Yeah, dude. She's not the side character; she's the main character.
Okay, fair enough. But if we're talking about like title,
Indiana Jones is a side character.
He really is. I swear, her sidekick is like more important to the plot than Indiana Jones is. You know, the kid,
about Short Round.
Yeah. New Short Round. The kid who can magically fly an airplane without any previous knowledge of how to do so. With the random guy who was sleeping in the airplane, just happened to be in there. Dude, oh my god, I feel like I don't want to get to the ending yet. But you know, I started watching Raiders.
This is
Huh?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I started watching Raiders the night after we streamed last week. And I was like, you know what? It's been a while. Let me, refresh my memory. Let me go in with sort of like a new perspective and try to be even from, though, I think there's a certain amount of grace that you have to give movies from like 40 years ago. But I would much rather rewatch that series regularly than ever watch anything that's than a lot of the stuff that's come out in the last 10 years or so.
Well, that's because there's passion behind it. That's one of the things this movie lacks is passion. I think I was telling you or saying last week, one of the things I enjoyed about Raiders of the Ark? The first one?
Raiders is the first one, yeah.
Yep. Is that how it felt like a proper cinematic production. Tons of extras, tons of set pieces, practical effects, everything like that. And then you go from that to this movie, and it's just like, it just seemed like a big old CGI fest. And I had a lot of problem with the de-aging technology. With
dude.
Harrison Ford, just because the voice didn't match the look.
And it's off in places, depending on the scene. Like sometimes you're like, all right, like if it's not moving a whole lot, it doesn't look that bad. Like you can kind of get away with it. But when he's moving in certain scenes, and they're hiding certain things specifically because it's de-aged, and they're either trying to save money. By the way, hello to everyone in the troll room. It's good to see all of you. Jenna is here. Matthew.
Not for long.
Jake. Hello, Zax. And Josh Mick 420 is also here as well. Thank you. Yes, I have seen the South Park episode they did on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's in hindsight, man. I mean, listen, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is still bad. There's this, we talk about it all the time where people, a new movie that has lowered the bar even further comes out. And so a lot of people will go back and they'll look at something like Crystal Skull and they'll be like, well, I mean, it's not as bad as this new one. It's like, yeah, but it's still not good.
Kind of like what I did with Temple of Doom. It's like, even though I didn't think it was bad, I went back after watching, halfway through Indiana Jones, the new one. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a lot better than this bull crap.
And again, I mean, man, I almost think maybe one of these days we'll actually go through each of them and do like a series on those, kind of like I want to do with Rush Hour, because it would be nice to go back through some classics that still hold up really, really well, and kind of talk about that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to what would be considered like to Temple of Doom, which would, for most people, would be considered the weakest entry in the original trilogy. And so, I went through all of those, and I'm thinking about it throughout this week, and I think on a purely like, if we were going for completely objective look at all three of the original trilogy, I think Raiders probably scoots by as the best. Like it barely beats out the other two. But if we're talking like I get to put a bit of my emotion and my feeling into it, I think Last Crusade's probably the best of the three. I think it's got you were talking about passion earlier. You can tell, especially at that time, and it's a stark contrast to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull if you watch Last Crusade and Crystal Skull back to back, because there's a lot of similarities between them, and you can see the passion of the cast in Last Crusade that is not there in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. There's a couple lines from Harrison Ford that he delivers so flat. There's this one in particular where it's towards the end of the movie, and he's going to return the skull to the City of Gold or whatever it is, and he's basically like, I have to go alone. You don't have to come with me. This is my responsibility. And I was like, oh my God, dude. Like, And the movie's still bad. I mean, that one.
So,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
I was going to say. So, how do you want to talk about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Disappointment?
I don't know, man. I mean, the opening. We can start if you want to just start with the opening. It doesn't really matter to me.
I thought of course they pick, generic bad guy characters, Nazis, to.
Well, they do it again.
And I understand.
Yeah, here's the thing. If this movie was good, it would have been fine, because that's what he did. I mean, that his primary enemy throughout the series is the Nazis. I mean, Temple of Doom aside, and I think had they gotten a little bit more creative with it, maybe he's fighting something a little bit different kind of organization or whatever. They tried that with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and the Russians, they're pretty pathetic in that movie. I had forgotten how pathetic they were as enemies in that movie. That movie is wild, dude. Shia LaBeouf swinging through the rainforest with monkeys. Like there's all sorts of stuff in that but I don't mind. I mean, it's set in a specific time. I don't even think necessarily the idea that it's towards the end of the war.
If they really had any guts, they would have done the Nazis in 2020 and made them MAGA supporters.
One of the best. I'd forgotten how much Nazi imagery is in that original trilogy, and in Last Crusade, Indiana Jones has to go to Berlin at the height of their power, and he runs into Hitler, and Hitler signs his dad's book. Like, he autographs his thing because he thinks that he wants an autograph from it. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into this, man, because that opening scene in Dial of Destiny, you have this moment where all of these guys who like Indiana Jones, by the time Last Crusade happens, he's like very well known by portions of the Nazi Party, because he's been doing, I mean, like, after you've been involved in the Ark of the Covenant, murking a team, and then he fought in the war, and then in Last Crusade as well, like, there's more of them that are involved in the hunt for the Holy Grail,
right?
And it's one of those things that you get to this movie, and every single one of those guys, like the commanders, all these people, they have no idea who he is. And it sucks because, and there is a little bit more, I think, when we talk about the type of movie that this is, you get a little bit more grace as far as the action is concerned, because there's a lot of moments where, the enemies just can't shoot, I think it gets more egregious in Crystal Skull, and especially in Dial of Destiny. Just some wild physics going on in this movie, but there's a little bit of grace with that. But like, the logic behind a lot of the scenarios that are happening, specifically in Dial of Destiny, where it's like, okay, you're telling me that none of these guys know who Indiana Jones is at this point. They've never heard like legends of this guy or like rumors of this guy throughout
Nothing
that.
at all, right?
Yeah. You would think, because especially after
Convenient.
2 times that he has been involved on the other side to them, and basically they've all gotten wiped out. He's still alive. He's thwarted them, and there's no there's no way they just wouldn't. And so he gets captured right away. And this is a problem that I think happens in Dial of Destiny quite a bit. It happens in Crystal Skull. Typically, when you go back and watch the original trilogy, he gets captured, but there's a good enough plot
explanation.
A good enough explanation plot point for why he's kept alive. And usually it comes down to his expertise.
Right.
They're like, well, look, he's the expert in this situation. We may never be able to to get our end goal because of that. And it's also, they always sort of underestimate him, which is something that works well.
Helena's the expert now. They don't need the white man. They got the white woman now.
Dude, you know, everybody's talked about it, but that line where she's like, you stole things from indigenous people or whatever, you know.
When she literally sells things on the black market herself. And she's
what? Just like the...
Talk about not being self-aware.
Massive hypocrite. And you know, like, that's one of those lines where I'm like, I feel like the writers didn't see that. They're like, oh, we got to put this in here. And this is the problem with these with modern writing a lot of the time, is that they want to make a character like that, but they're never consistent. They just throw those lines in because it's a modern thing to say.
Well, let's think about the women in Indiana Jones, right?
Yes, let's.
And why Helena is different from all of them. Yep. So in the first one, you have Marion.
Yes.
Right? And she is resilient. She's smart, resourceful, tough. She's a counterpart and a helpmate to Indiana Jones. And
by the way, and strong.
Yes, she shoots the machine gun to help him. She takes control.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In some ways, man, she's got more characteristics that would be associated with a male than Harrison Ford does playing Indiana Jones. She drinks.
Starts out and
she fights,
drinking.
Yeah.
She's out drinking that man that's like twice her size.
Yeah, which is a great point that comes up later on in the movie. You know, they set up her character, and that's the thing, man. Is like the strong female character has always existed in one form or another throughout cinema, and this rewriting of history as if none of these women came before. You know, it's disingenuous, and it's just, it sucks, to say the least.
And then you have what's her name,
Willie,
who number 2,
who is a little bit more of your traditional,
damsel in distress,
yeah,
prototype character, but she's a step in for the audience because she didn't ask to get brought along on the journey with Indiana Jones. She gets swept away by him, not in that, like, literally forced to go on the journey with him, but at knife point. And you know, that's why she hates everything along the way. Yeah, she's an annoying character, but she's meant to be, because it's like, if we had to go on those journeys with Indiana Jones, we would be complaining all the time too. I think she's a bit more of a realistic character than Marion's is. Not saying that Marion's isn't realistic, just I found Willie's to be more annoying, but definitely more realistic.
Yeah, you know, her screaming didn't bother me as much as I know that it has other people. It's a little much.
But that screaming sets up stuff. It's not just random screaming just to scream. Like, and they land in the jungle. She screams at all the animals.
That part is hilarious. Alongside. By the way, I was cracking up when she's like running through, and the monkeys and like all that stuff comes out, and she grabs the snake and throws it.
Doesn't even realize it.
Yeah.
But then later on, when they're at the palace, you know, we see Indiana and Short Round go through that underground for the temple, and they end up in the room with the spikes, and we know what's on the ground, and she's already complained about all the animals and everything she has to do, but she's the one that has to reaches her hand, like step on all of them, go through that, and reach her hand in the area through the bugs and slime to pull the lever to prevent them from getting killed.
Yeah.
And so there's, you know, it makes sense. You know, the previous screaming from her sets up that scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the one of the greatest things too, and I want to get to Elsa because Elsa's my favorite, my personal favorite, which might get me in trouble.
That's gonna be all you, because I haven't seen the third one.
I'll try not to give too much away. I know you've seen them, but
you can say what you want. I'm not worried about that.
Oh, with Willie in particular, though, so just staying on her for an extra second. One of the other thing, well, it really goes along with all of them, but the chemistry between Harrison Ford and each of the leading ladies is always really, really good too.
Yes, it is.
It's just it's believable, and that's that's all you can really ask for when it comes to those scenarios. You want to believe what's being presented to you, and so, you know, like the back and forth with Willie. where he like comes over and she thinks that he finally decided to come over and she doesn't know what's going on with the situation, and he's literally just like hung a dude in the other room.
Yes.
And he touches the statue and like pushes through, and she's like, what is happening? Like just totally lost as to the scenario.
She tries to touch the other side.
Yeah. she's like she's real jumpy about the situation.
Yeah.
I love I'll come back to Short Round because it plays into where I think they should have gone, especially with Everything Everywhere All at Once being such a big hit last year. And the timing might be a little off because I'm sure they started filming Dial of Destiny before that happened. It's not an excuse to not have brought him back. Really, it wasn't. They should have brought him back in 2008, but we'll get there. Elsa is the most interesting as far as depth is concerned with the three love interests in the original trilogy. And it's because she starts out as your typical, like, she's smart. They set her up where she's not afraid to get her hands dirty with the different scenarios that are going on in that movie. There's the love interest between the two of them, and there's a little humor in that as well, which is always really good. And then about a quarter of the way through the movie, she double crosses Indiana Jones for the Nazis, and it's funny looking at it now. I mean, when you're younger, it's like, oh man, she went over to the bad guys, and now it's like that's almost way more charged in 2023 than it was.
Yes.
For the previous 34 years, that was not. It's like, oh, okay, that's just the plot point. She's Austrian, and she is like, she wants the Grail. She's like hunting for the Grail, and she wants it no matter what. And so whatever is the most advantageous way for her to get her hands on it, that's what she's going to do. And they do something that I guarantee you would never see in this current timeline that we are living in. I was telling you before that it's probably about halfway through the movie. They go to Berlin to get Sean Connery's book back from the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And Elsa is there, and there's a book burning going on. They're throwing books into this massive, they're having this big celebration, throwing the books in there. Hitler's there, like the whole deal. And in that scene, the book burning is happening, and Elsa is in tears. And it's subtle, but again, we're talking about very well-made movies where they used to allow the audience they used to allow the audience to be able to infer what was going on with her. And she does mention something. She has a line where she talks to Indiana Jones right after that. He gets the book back from her. And she's like, I don't care about that, their party. Like the Grail is the only thing that matters to me. And she has this like slow turnaround because she sees like all the awful things that the Nazis are doing. And then ultimately she succumbs to her selfish desire to get the Grail, and it's her undoing. But it's one of those things, I was watching that and I was like, dude, I don't remember the last time. I mean, I think maybe there could be an argument made for something like Arcane as far as the kind of development that you get from a character, especially like a leading lady. Yeah. And I was just, honestly, dude, I've always loved The Last Crusade, and watching it again, it was like I almost had like a renewed
love for it,
because it was like the amount of effort that went in to craft that story, the characters. It's got a great sense of humor. It still sticks to that sort of that Indiana Jones writing and the tropes that are specific to those movies. It's a lot of fun, and it's an excellently made movie. Like I just absolutely love it. And it's crazy because you would never see something like that today, because there are, dude, it'd be like, and I mean, like, maybe it's specifically because it's so charged because of what the word Nazi means these days. But I love.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I love that they did something like that, because you don't see, like, every character that we're seeing come out in a lot of the, whether it's like even look at the Marvel movies. There is not. Okay, Black Widow might come close as far as like being a kind of a side character, but honestly, dude, I don't know if there's a female written in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that's as written as well as Elsa is. And I might add Marion and Willie to that list too. And just going back to this, I'm like, what happened? I was like, what happened to the passion that people had? I mean, dude, you look at
David, don't lie. If it wasn't for Disney, we wouldn't have strong female characters. They're the first ones to do it. The first one to feature black people and minorities in movies. It's Disney, man. It's always been from the beginning.
Yeah.
Since the very first Iron Man movie, David.
And then let me talk about Short Round quickly, and then we'll switch back over to Dial of Destiny. Because
well, I wanted to. You could talk about Short Round, but I wanted to compare those women to Helena and the new one.
Yeah. So Short Round is in Temple of Doom is pretty much a direct parallel for Indiana Jones. They do a lot of shots where, you know, Indiana Jones is fighting a guy and Short Round is fighting a guy at the same time, and you can see the care that he has for Short Round, and the fact that they never brought him back in Crystal Skull or in, well, I'm kind of glad he wasn't in Dial of Destiny, to be honest, with how that turned out, but they did such a disservice to that, because there seemed like there could have been so much more to come out of that, especially if Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had actually been well written and a little bit of love and passion had been put into that movie. You could have seen something like that. But yeah, comparing it to obviously Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and really all of the other characters that are in that movie. But we can focus on her, and I'll sprinkle in the rest of them as we go along. So, Joseph, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, tell me about this character in Dial of Destiny.
So, where the other ones were separate characters on their own, this is very much a Kathleen Kennedy stand-in. She is supposed to take Indiana Jones's place, and Indiana Jones is less of a person and now just more like an agent or a character such as 007. And she's just a know-it-all, knows the answers to everything. She's a hypocrite apparently too, because she criticizes him for being a Tomb Raider basically. And I guess she doesn't like Lara Croft either. But yet she runs a black market selling.
Yeah, she sells artifacts to get herself out of debt.
Yeah, exactly. And so not only that, but what was the other thing that stood out to me about her? Oh yeah, she's greedy. Like it never comes across. I say greedy as in she wants the fame that Indiana Jones has. Yeah. She's not there for him in any capacity. She's just there for herself.
Yeah. She clearly doesn't know anything about him. Has no idea.
But David, she's his goddaughter, and from his best friend that we've never heard about ever. Come on, David, it's totally believable, bro. It's his best friend.
The best friend,
1 year old.
Dude, that was another thing that annoyed me about it, is that, you know, his best friend in that, or like one of his colleagues who's a really close friend, he never would have taken someone like that on one of those adventures with him. Now, to be fair, he took Short Round, but I think there's probably an argument that he's a, you know, Short Round doesn't seem to have a family. In fact, I think they go into why Indiana Jones and Short Round built the relationship that they have. But if you look at a lot of the people who are around in Indiana in the original trilogy, they're all very capable for one reason or another, roguish. A lot of them are willing to put their lives on the line for whatever happened, whether it's fortune and glory or whether it's to get the artifacts back to the museum. Like, they all have specific purposes. And that guy, he's bumbling, meek, it just the complete opposite of anyone that we've ever seen before in a scenario like that. And you're like, why did he bring him along? He was a liability the whole time.
And not only that, but with Helena, she has no character arc that I was able to discern in the movie. Whereas like Marion,
no one really does though.
Willie,
do they?
No
in
one
the new
does.
One?
But Willie, specifically too, both of them have a character arc in the original movies.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana Jones has his own character arc.
Yeah.
Short Round, like so many different characters have their own character arc. Whereas this, it's like things are happening just around them, like, and they're all the same in each of them. And this is more of like instead of a deconstruction of Indiana Jones, this is more of a destruction of Indiana Jones. I've never seen, like, we speak often about how it seems like these companies just hate the characters they're presenting on film, and this is a great example.
Man.
Like example A of hating a character, being like, it's like the writers were like envisioning their worst enemy was this white man, and we're going to just destroy Indiana Jones and sub him in for a woman. And it's just it's puke. It's
so
like
so disrespectful.
And then they try and shield themselves from criticism by claiming racism and misogynism, calling us misogynists and things like that. And it's like, well,
didn't you like?
How can we? Go ahead.
Didn't you like the woman of color who worked for the CIA who was helping the Nazis?
Oh, that was even better. It was what was his name? Oh man, hang on, give me 1 second. Mads
Mikkelsen.
His character, Dr. whatever his name was.
The guy
was
who
like he was supposed to be a racist, right?
Yeah.
In the opening scene.
Dude, we have
not the very opening scene with him, but when he interacts with the black waiter, he's like, "Where are you from?" And the black waiter's like, "Brooklyn," and then he's like, "But where are you really from?"
It was so bad, dude. It's
supposed to show his like racism, and then it's like his head like operative is the black lady,
and then he copes really hard in that same scene because he's like, you didn't win the war, Hitler lost it. And it's like, oh, you got him. Yeah. Great argument, buddy. But yeah, dude,
apparently the Nazis opened up their own DEI agency.
Yeah, and dude, Mads Mikkelsen gets absolutely obliterated in that opening scene, in that opening segment when he's on the train. He's on the side of a train, and I don't know, man. I don't know how fast trains were going in like late 30s, early 40s. But I feel like it would be fast enough that when that pole hits him directly in the face, he probably should have been dead or horribly mutilated because of that situation. And we see him, I guess it's supposed to be like probably 40, 45 years later. No, it's not supposed to be that. The timeline in this is weird. It's the 60s, right? Are we at the...
Yeah, 1969.
69.
Yep.
We see him again.
We went to the moon, David.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, no. Troll Room can take that one. We see him again, and he looks totally fine. In fact, he looks like he's hardly aged. You're like, Indiana Jones has become a crotchety old man in his boxers, and Mads Mikkelsen is like, the vision of health for it being 30, 35 years, whatever the time is supposed to be right there. Just like, guys, like, come on. And then, before Phoebe Waller even shows up, right, he goes through the scenario, he yells at the youths, he goes to his class, and nobody's interested in what he has to say. It turns out that was the last class he's ever going to teach, and he's retiring. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is in there, and you get that first moment of her being so smug because she knows all of the answers.
And it's not even that first scene with her that is bad. It's everything that precedes that. So then when you look back, you're like, ugh.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can tell from the beginning how smug.
Yeah, how smug it is.
Like, she is so smug. I think it was Mahler who mentioned, like, she knows where the camera is at all times. They're just kind of like so smug comment. Every time she's on the screen, and it's one of those things where you're like, y'all, can we like someone give her some sort of direction for this? Like, and it goes back to what you were saying, that she doesn't have any character arc in it, because from the beginning to the end of the movie, she is the exact same character.
What else has she been in?
Fleabag.
Have you seen that show?
No.
Okay. I don't. His Dark Material, she's someone's voice in that. I wouldn't be able to tell you who.
Yeah,
apparently she was in Solo, a Star Wars story.
Really?
Yeah,
did she play? Was it voice acting in that too?
I'm assuming so. She played L3-37.
Yeah. The feminist robot. Yeah.
I don't even remember that movie. That's hilarious.
Dude, no, she plays the robot that turns into the Millennium Falcon, right? Troll Room, tell me if I'm wrong about that, because I've only seen Solo once. But if that's who I think it is, that, yeah, she does some sort of like rebellion and then gets shot, and then they upload her memory into the Millennium Falcon. And that is the origin story of why the Millennium Falcon is called a her or a she.
That's too good, man.
Thanks for bringing that memory back. Crikey, dude.
Oh, man, at least Disney's consistent.
Yeah.
With their terrible writing. They destroyed one franchise, and now they're after this one. Destroy Lucasfilms forever. Nah, so I can't comment on her acting ability itself. Just in this movie, I couldn't tell if it's how she was directed and led and how the character was written, or if it was her or all of them. But as far as like more so one or the other.
I think it's her.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, I think it is.
I was trying to be a nice dude.
Honestly, man, I kept wondering through that whole movie, like what favors did she give out in order to get into the position that she's in? Because if this movie is any indication of her talent, along with some of the writing, she's been involved in some of that, and people haven't been happy with that. She's kind of like this Amazon darling, because she won awards for Fleabag, and it's like, awards are politics for Hollywood. Like, it doesn't mean anything for you guys to have won all of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that your product is good because someone gave you a statue.
She didn't seem like the type of person that had the lead acting capabilities chops.
No, not at all. That was the other thing, right? I'm sure you felt the same way, but I don't even remember when it was during the movie. I was like, I would never watch something similar to this where she was the lead.
No, it's like I think last week I said, like, there's some people that I just don't care to see on film. Like, I just don't like how they look. Again, that I'm not talking about they look ugly or they look beautiful or whatnot. When I say that, what I mean is they just have a look I don't like. I don't really care to see them on screen. I said last week, one of them being Tom Cruise, with the exception of the Mission Impossible movies, and then the other one being Meryl Streep. But I could tell you what, though, they have charisma, and I understand why they're movie stars, and they're great. I never say they're terrible actors or anything like that. They're great actors, right?
Sure, it's preference.
Phoebe, I mean, but with Phoebe, it's I don't see it. She doesn't have that charisma, that star power that indicates,
I may have mentioned this last week. She falls into the same category as Amy Schumer for me now, and Melissa McCarthy, where it's like if it's like, oh, they're in this movie, no thank you.
Yeah.
No thank you. No. I'm not gonna see that.
Hey, Melissa McCarthy actually did a up and down job in The Little Mermaid.
What is that? What?
The Little Mermaid, up and down? Like, so there were certain parts, like there's certain parts she was really great in, and other parts where it seemed like she was phoning it in.
I remember liking her in Bridesmaids and being like, oh wow, and then everything since then I haven't been able to get through any of it. Been like, all right, I'll give her another chance. Nope. Give her another chance. Nope. Ghostbusters. Oh.
Oh no. I think she got hoodwinked into some of those movies.
Maybe so.
Drop her stop. stock some.
I think one after the other, man. Just
it doesn't help you.
Yeah,
I think that's why Henry jumped ship on The Witcher.
Yeah, which was
I can't stick around
choice.
for this.
Yeah. So yeah, she's pretty terrible. Just consistently through the whole movie.
I can't think of a redeeming quality about her character.
She is set up to tell Indiana Jones that he shouldn't unalive himself. You're still important to the world, Indy.
But my favorite part about this movie is like her knocking him out and then carrying him onto the plane and then flying through the time portal, and then they hop onto another plane and fly to New York from Europe, and then she gives him first aid and carries him to his apartment, changes him into his pajamas, and then puts him to bed.
Oh, yeah.
And then he wakes up from the punch. I mean, just superb. A masterclass, David, of writing. Every college and university and film course class should include that on how to properly write. I was just, I was left speechless.
I just couldn't fit, dude. The third act is a mess.
You're being too polite.
Am I being too? I mean, it's a disaster. Is that better? Like it's. I didn't know what to make of it. Like, so the Dial of Destiny is supposed to, just for everybody listening, if you're not aware, the Dial of Destiny was something that was made by Archimedes. I think they said like 600-ish BC, something like that, right? Or earlier than that.
Yeah, something like that.
Sorry, I can't remember the there was so much going on. The timelines were the least of my my worries when trying to watch this. So for some reason, I guess it's because it was like a legend, Mads Mikkelsen's character believes that the dial is a time machine and that you set it to a specific time and you can go back to that. And so what he wants to do is essentially replace Hitler. And
this dude's a NASA scientist, like top notch, right?
He's supposed to be incredibly smart. And doesn't,
I know where you're going.
Yeah, like he doesn't ever realize until he is told, I actually think by Indiana Jones, right? If I remember correctly. He actually, at least they gave him that. He is the one that figured out that slipstreams in the air meant it's still stupid. It's so stupid. They shouldn't time travel just like should not be a thing in 99% of movies. Most writers, especially these days, can't even do it a little bit of justice. It's miserable to the point where
he didn't account for like conventional time or something like that.
Yeah, or like Archimedes wouldn't have been aware of something that happens in the atmosphere because for some reason the dial opens up portals in the sky. Which I'm not 100% sure if it was actually explained why the portals or the specific portal that takes you back to a very specific time where Archimedes was hoping to get help fighting the Romans. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so they go, and some of the baddies start machine gunning down Romans from the sky in this airplane for like no reason. Not to mention, dude, I love that they have the same physics as season 8 of Game of Thrones, where ancient massive spears are so accurate that they're able to hit what would have been considered an incredibly futuristic plane out of the sky. Like constantly hitting it. It's just like those people would have been so freaked out by that. I don't know if they would have been able to do that at all. I mean, like, there's no way to have an actual argument. I don't know, unless you're just a scholar of like the time period to be like, well, if blah blah blah, you know what I mean? But it seems beyond reasonable to be like, not only did they hit it once, but they hit it 3 or 4 times, in the same way that like in season 8 of Game of Thrones, they were able to just knock the dragon out of the sky that easily. Because, you know, everyone goes in a super straight line, so it's always really easy to be able to hit stuff, you know?
Exactly.
Hate it, dude. I hate current
Modern
logic
writing.
with this stuff. Yeah.
Maybe D&D would have been able to do this better than whoever the director was, and I guess
Maybe.
Kathleen Kennedy. Maybe.
No, it was shoot.
I
I've
know
heard his
Kathleen
name a
wasn't
couple
the director,
times.
but what's his name? Yeah, I have to. It's James Mangold.
Yes, thank you.
He was a producer on Logan.
Great.
And Ford versus Ferrari.
Good for him.
No, he was the director for Logan and for the Wolverine.
I wonder what they
And 310 to Yuma. Okay, so he's not.
I wonder what they did to get him to make this.
He must have not
And-
had that much power.
Yeah,
to do
I was
what he
gonna say
wanted
that
to.
too.
He had to have
Mhm.
because he's directed some good movies.
I don't know, man. I this movie. So we were texting about this, but this movie is almost like it's about 2 million or so under 250 million globally. So domestic and abroad. Its opening weekend in China, it made $2 million, which is really bad.
That is terrible.
It will probably hit 250 million, which is still 50 million under what we know to be the budget.
Yep.
And that's not including marketing.
Which is yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And the rest of the ticket sales that go in. And I've seen some people online, dude, that are like, you have to earn back 3 times what you spent on it. And I'm just like, y'all, please look into this a little bit deeper and don't just Google it for 2 seconds. Like there's a lot. I've seen a few times that's happened. Or people are like talking about this and they're blowing it more out of proportion than it actually is. Like, it's bad. Don't get me wrong. It's bad. But there's this tendency online for people to try to hammer that even harder. Like it's just, even worse than it actually is.
Yeah, there's no good numbers you can go off of, but we know that studios have a tendency to not give out exact numbers. So even the $300 million budget, that's going to be on the conservative side. That's not even going to be the
if this movie really
exact number.
I would hope for their sake that they were being honest about that 300 million number.
And so
that's crazy.
But isn't the rule of thumbs like
2.5
times?
Yeah, that's typically what somewhere in there. I mean, I don't know, man. This thing, maybe there was just like a lot of money laundering going on with this movie, because after it was over, I was like, I don't know where they spent that $300 million. It couldn't have all been on like Harrison Ford's de-aging in the first 20 minutes. And I'm just like, I don't know what they did. If it wasn't worth
this is definitely gonna lose more money than The Flash.
Yeah, I think it's on its way. It really is bottoming out pretty hard, and it's only been out for like 10 days.
We always said that there was a way for DC to catch up to Marvel and to Disney. But Disney did DC the favor to try and catch up to them.
But man, I don't know. I mean, so 300 million, if we just say 600 million to break even.
7.
You want to say 7? That's fine.
Let's say 7. I think that's a fair.
That's probably a pretty fair number. This movie's never gonna do that. There's no way, because I think it's capped out for the most part. There's no way if it keeps bottoming out the way that it has, that they're gonna keep it in theaters maybe longer than a month. Man, this might end up on Disney Plus like within the month.
The Flash is supposed to be coming out on HBO Max in the
pretty soon,
next
right?
month or so.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it was by comparison, Avatar: The Way of the Water stayed in the movie theater what seemingly seemed like an entire year.
And that movie was what, 200 million to make? Is that right? How much? Do you remember how much it was?
No.
Because it had to get to a pretty high number. Wasn't it like 500 million to break even with that?
I thought
Was
you
it
said
more?
they needed $1 billion.
Was it really $1 billion? Was that movie was that a $500 million movie? Because they did it, right? And I think it hit almost 2.
So just briefly looking at it, I'm showing that the estimated budget for The Way of the Water was between $350 and $400 million.
Okay. At least you can see it in that movie.
If you trust Wikipedia, they say it could have cost as much as $460 million. So let's just say between $350 to $500 million.
Yeah.
It still made like $2-point-something billion.
It was pretty successful considering how much it cost to make that. Yeah.
So it was a production budget of $250 million, according to Dexterra. So so you think about, you double that for marketing, $500 million, and then
Whoopa was saying that some of that might have been investment on the third movie as well, because I think maybe they were filming them back to back or trying to get a lot of that stuff done to potentially bring costs down for the third movie, which makes sense. That's actually pretty smart if that's what they did. Sort of like filming Two Towers and Return of the King back to back. Because if you can save on your production costs, that makes sense. They wanted $3 billion, if I remember correctly, for Way of Water. I don't think it hit $3 billion though.
No, I don't think it did. I mean, they may get $3 billion out of it when it's all said and done. But
so
not at the box office, but with everything else combined.
Does
you
this?
Know how popular DVDs are now.
I just honestly, dude, I want to know what's going to happen now. Because this is a massive failure. I mean, like, Disney's had back-to-back-to-back failures this summer.
Well, David, I think you can rest assured that they brought Bob Iger back to write this shit.
Oh, yeah. Remember when weren't people, like, kind of happy he was coming back at one point? Like, maybe. And, it's like,
and he's the start of it all.
Ooh. Yeah, maybe he came back to just, like, kill it. Just finally let it die, dude. Yeah, man. I mean, let's see. So there were a lot of other things. I haven't seen people complain about it quite. I mean, it wasn't good, but the short round replacement, not great. I almost forgot. They brought Sala back to also be sad and lonely and missing adventure. And it's this whole thing where, this 80-year-old Indiana Jones says, "No, Sala, you can't come with me. Those days are behind us. This isn't an adventure." And then he goes on an adventure without Sala. And it's like, did y'all bring... Because I was trying to find that... I wanted to make the cover image for the picture of Harrison Ford in his boxers, but I couldn't find an image of it that didn't have like watermarks or anything on it, which was really annoying. But I was like, oh, okay, so it's fine for him to go, but like he can't bring Sala along. Like, why would you? I don't know why you would do that. Like, John Rhys Davies is a good actor. It would have been nice to actually have him in the movie.
I know they did my boy dirty.
Oh, you know who else
my boy Gimli.
Dude, you know who else they did dirty?
Who's that?
Antonio Banderas. Surprise to everyone who didn't know that Antonio Banderas has a role in this movie. Someone had mentioned it a couple weeks ago.
I had no idea until I saw it.
Yeah, and he shows up and I go, oh yeah, I forgot he was in this.
Dude, if I would have told you 10 years ago that Harrison Ford, Antonio Banderas, John Rhys Davies, and Boyd Holbrook and Mads Mikkelsen were all going to be in a movie.
In an Indiana Jones movie, nonetheless.
What would you have said? You'd probably been like, that's probably
dude,
a great movie.
Like 10 years ago, if they were if that was kind of the rumor that was out, And, they did the normal thing of like, oh, they want to, try to make right what Crystal Skull got wrong or whatever, really bring Indiana Jones back to his roots. And, we're trying to bring back who we can. And yeah, but what a waste, dude. I mean, what a waste of talent.
The graves of Harrison Ford, Antonio Banderas, John Rhys Davies in the Indiana Jones film, like cinematically.
It's that Godfather meme where he's like, "What have you done to my boy?" Like,
yes.
Yeah,
man, what a follow-up.
That whole scenario, right? So for those of you who don't know, Antonio Banderas plays like a deep sea diver, probably treasure hunter. They're doing this whole thing where, and I didn't look into to whether this was even a thing or not, but he has some sort of pretty dumb explanation of like, if you don't spend that much time in deep sea water and you come up within like 3 minutes or something like that, you probably won't get the bends. And they're just like, yeah, seems legit. And then they all go down there for longer than 3 minutes, by the way. And the Nazis show up and they cut. There's 4 of them down there. It's Phoebe Waller, Harrison Ford. I was about to say Jean-Claude Van Damme, but that's not right. Goodness, his Antonio Banderas, and then random member of Antonio Banderas's crew. And they cut the line for the one crew member. Conveniently, they got that right. Because I can't imagine they asked anyone on board, like it's a weird scenario, right? Where they come on the ship, there's 4 people down in the water, like pretty far down deep into the water. They don't know who's picking up the second piece of the dial. So they cut a line, killing that guy conveniently. Like they just so happen to be able to grab or like cut the right one, and then pull the rest of them back up. And it was just the weirdest thing where you're like, why wouldn't you just pull them all back up and then get rid of whoever you didn't need?
Right.
Or if you know the dial's down there and all of your problems, well, I know they do try to pull the whole like, oh, well, we need Indiana Jones alive because he knows like how to get to where, he understands how to like do this stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But then again, part of me is like, these guys have been obsessed with this. Is Indiana Jones and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, are they the only 2 people that actually know how to do all this? Like, you couldn't get rid of the people who are the biggest threat to you accomplishing what you're trying to do, and then just try to figure it out from there. You've got the dial at that point. Like, there has to be.
Go about your business.
Yeah, there's like I guess there's all of this historical like evidence of this stuff. Like there's no one else in the world besides the 2 of them that's going to be able to help you accomplish this. And they would have solved their problem if they had just cut all their lines, thrown the discount short round over the side of the boat, and went on their merry way. Would have ended the movie right there. And it's weird. The whole movie just, if it's not dour, it's really boring. Just extended stretches. The Dial of Destiny as a MacGuffin for this kind of movie isn't great either.
No, it's not.
You have the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders. Temple of Doom is really more about like the occult nature of the stuff that's going on than it is about the actual artifact. But still, there is like historical precedence for that, and it's kind of there's that mystical element of what's happening, and like are the stones really as magical as these people are saying that they are, or is there something else to that whole scenario? And then of course you have the cup. Oh my gosh, the Holy Grail in the third one. And then, of course, like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's aliens, and it's dumb, and as bad of a MacGuffin as the Dial of Destiny. But it's like, why couldn't they have gone back to... I just don't... Other than the fact that it was truly malicious, what they were doing with Dial of Destiny, they couldn't have gone back to some sort of interesting historical artifact from a culture that may or may not have had mystical powers. Like, they had to do an Archimedes invention to push in time travel into the movie. Like,
Yeah.
That whole ending segment or whatever, where they're like in there, you know, all of the bad guys conveniently get killed off. It's not satisfying at all.
Nope.
The way any of that happens. There's like, you have the one random soldier who almost kills Indiana, and then Archimedes, like, students or whoever, the people, his guards or whoever, like, take care of that really quickly. Oh man, that whole final act just falls so flat.
That last act is
they skip
atrocious.
through. Yeah, it's like, how on earth did they get back? Like, I guess the plane that Discount Short Round had enough gas to get them back. Not to mention, it had to carry 4 people. And
Yep.
So who cares about logic in that? Don't ask questions, right? Like, who cares about the
I
logic
was just
in that?
happy to hurry up and be done with that movie.
Harrison Ford is still old. Yes, he is, Zach.
A waste of a cast, that's for sure, and a director as well.
Yeah, man. I don't know, man. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I'm really happy that trilogy exists.
Yeah.
And
Again, no amount of CGI can make up, and clarity and sharpness and contrast can make up for a poorly written story. You could be more forgiving of all of the above if the story's written well than you can for this junk.
I told you too today that Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I don't know if if inflation was added into this number or not. I'm gonna guess not. $18 million budget, and in its first theatrical release, roughly $212 million. So massive success. Was released the following year, made another $21 million, and has been released for like special weekends, a couple days here and there, and has made a couple million pretty much every time it's been re-released. Dial of Destiny will quickly end up in the bargain bin, if not completely erased by Disney. I don't know if you've seen some of that going on.
Oh, yeah.
But companies are starting to just completely remove movies from existence at this point.
They're bad movies?
I guess.
Probably not. Probably the more troubling ones, David. The less PC ones, like that Community episode of Dungeons and Dragons that got it right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we know that they already will do that for stuff that's not considered politically correct at this point. But yeah, man, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with that, where they're just kind of erasing things that aren't successful, or like there was some the one that's going around right now is there's some movie that was on Disney Plus called Crater, about like a family in space or something. It was on Disney Plus for a couple of weeks and then just disappeared.
Yeah, they're making cost-cutting maneuvers.
Yeah,
that's why they're deleting them.
And I still, release the Batgirl cut.
Yes,
I still want to see
please.
It.
Dude, I bet that movie would do so much better now in the movie theater.
It'd be so funny. It was like, well, it's not Dial of Destiny. I mean, you got that going for you.
Yep.
That's really it, man. I mean, I don't know I don't know if there's anything else. I'll remember something tomorrow, in the middle of work. If you haven't
that's how it usually goes.
If you haven't seen the original trilogy, I highly recommend it. And then just pretending like 2008 and this new one didn't happen. We do have to talk about one other thing, though.
Okay. Let's do it.
I've already mentioned a number of times that A Crystal Skull is not a good movie. Like, it's just not. There's some interesting stuff in it, and you can see Steven Spielberg's kind of like hallmark stuff that he did with Indiana Jones in the movie. But again, it feels pretty soulless. It doesn't seem like the passion is there for that film. But man, did they do Shia LaBeouf's character dirty. That was honestly, dude, one of the I was really put off by how they're that they made his character die in Vietnam. There was something about that even more so than some of the stuff that was happening earlier on with the shut up, youths, your music's too loud. There was something about them taking out a character that I don't really have much fondness for, but it's our explanation for why he's not in this, especially after the way that Crystal Skull ends. Because Crystal Skull is a lot of things. It has a very happy ending. It's kind of
they do him justice, at least.
Yeah,
that's the one positive thing you can say about it.
You can tell there's at least still a little respect for the character in the end of that movie. And in this, he's on the boat and he's yeah, he enlisted to piss me off, which already is I don't know if you guys actually saw Crystal Skull, because that's not the kind of relationship that they had by the end of that. And then it's yeah, and he died, and my entire life fell apart after that. And it's
The best part is how don't they get married at the end of Crystal Skull? That's what I've heard. Him and Marion.
Mm-hmm.
And then it opens up. The new one opens up with them being divorced.
Yeah.
And then just to get remarried.
Yeah, basically they're just back together at the end. It feels like they're trying to take away the not that, I don't know. It's a weird call because Crystal Skull is not fondly remembered. It just isn't. People don't really like that movie. You're gonna have
until they saw this one.
Yeah,
its stock just went up.
Oh, I can't wait for all of the essays of being were we too hard on Crystal Skull? It's no, stop it. It's still not good. But I don't know, that rubbed me so wrong, dude. Especially because it's we already know how depressed he is, that he hates everything. His wife has left him. And then he's yeah, my son died in Vietnam because he was trying to spite me, essentially. And you're this is not the way to do this.
Nope.
What
are we doing here?
Yeah.
And then just have him go in circles with Marion in this movie, It's just for some reason she wants to marry him, even though in the beginning she divorced him.
They'll always end up back together. It's please stop doing this. Please cut it out.
They should have just shot him at the end.
I know, dude. At this point, it was maybe they should have put Indiana out of his misery by the time the movie was over. I wanted
had him die somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a miserable movie to watch.